Climate is the kitchen table issue of our lifetimes. Emily Atkin wrote that earlier today. She is a climate reporter. Food prices, water, and electric bills are all impacted by climate change and the warming planet. Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Bannard, Executive Director and founder of Earth Gives. It's the organization that's behind Earth Gives Day. We exist to help scale the impact of many environmental nonprofits doing the work to directly confront the growing crisis. Earth Gives Day is the only US-wide giving day, and it's the only giving day focused solely on climate justice, and the environment. Why? Because when we did the research, we found that only 2% of all philanthropy goes to environmental causes. And we saw that as a problem to solve. Yet this isn't about just giving dollars, it's about giving your time to learn and lead on solutions. And that's why we're honored to have you here today and welcome you to the first Earth Gives Day Power Hour for 2024. You're going to hear from Dr. Eliza Nemser and Paul Moinester. These are two incredible experts to ask questions of after their presentations. Paul will spend about 5 minutes sharing insights on how your money can work for a sustainable future, not against it. Eliza will spend about 20 minutes on climate advocacy as we consider these kitchen table issues. We'll open it up for your questions, and then I'll wrap it up and send us off to maybe one breakout, maybe two. We also want to inspire you to visit earthgives.org to learn more, make donations, and even consider setting up a fundraiser for organizations and nonprofits like the two you'll be hearing from tonight. You can also click on the blue button right below anyone's logo and set up your own fundraiser to share through October 1st. Now let's meet our experts. So Paul Moinester is a problem solver. What brought him to establish Topo Finance is that he recognized the huge need to align the world of banking and finance with solutions on the climate crisis impacting our homes, our businesses, our health, and so much more. He worked in DC in the Department of Transportation and as a senior legislative assistant for a congressperson. He turned his fly fishing passion into a months-long journey to advocate for threatened wild fish populations. And he also did a lot of advocacy work for wild spaces. He then pivoted to the financial industry, founding Topo Finance in 2017. You're about to get a healthy dose of how the passive impact of your money might be making the planet hotter and what you can do about it next. Dr. Nemser leads Climate Changemakers, a nonpartisan volunteer climate advocacy organization she founded in 2020. And how often do you meet an earthquake hazard analyst? Well, we have one tonight. She is a PhD geoscientist turned climate strategist, organizer, and advocate. She's been recognized as a nonprofit climate media change maker fixer by GRIST, which is a nonprofit media entity. She was noted as their 2022 GRIST 50 Climate Fixer. Eliza is on the advisory board of Climate Voices, which is also a nonprofit participant in Earth Gives Day, and serves with many other groups. She's served with the the Center for Environmental Health, and with the NRDC Action Fund, and she was a senior seismic geologist at AECOM, which is a multinational infrastructure consulting firm. So Paul is up first. We want him to take away, and then he'll pitch it to Eliza.
Thanks so much, Rhonda, and yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to meet you all. Yeah, and so as Rhonda mentioned, I came to finance through a relatively circuitous route that involved working in the Marlboro halls of Congress and on the salmon streams of Alaska. And so my journey into finance is actually a little bit of kind of, I think, a bit representative of why the work that we're doing is so important. And so I had spent essentially 15 years working on climate in all these different realms, transportation policy, energy policy, leading the congressional opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline, fighting coal mines in Alaska, and all these different things. And when we started really looking at I had spent a lot of my life fighting to put out fires. It was fighting to stop bad things from happening right before they were about to happen. It was sort of these last ditch efforts to rally the community, rally the environmental movement in order to be able to stop these horrible things from having devastating effects that would be impossible to undo. And eventually I sort of got tired of realizing that I was fighting the symptoms of the problem and not and as opposed to the source of the problem. And so I went on this sort of years-long journey, and it was sort of put myself back through grad school unpaid, sitting at I'm speaking of tables, sitting at my table in my apartment by myself, reading books and listening to podcasts, and sort of really trying to understand. And I developed this whole thesis that had nothing to do with the financial system, that was all about sort of building political power in the outdoor space. And it just so happened to be at a conference with the outdoor industry in Denver, Colorado in 2020, and I had a meeting that was scheduled with me with Bank of the West. And at the time, Bank of the West was trying to make big inroads into the outdoor industry to try to recruit their business. And I remember calling my colleague who had set up the meeting and was like, why the hell am I meeting with some I mean, not like mad, but just like confused, like, why am I meeting with this bank? And I had this conversation with them where they explained to me the role that banking and investing plays driving climate change, which totally changed my perspective on everything and made me realize that I had sort of missed this thing. And so the simple story that I tell to some degree that kind of illuminates this is like, and we're here talking about the role that money can play both philanthropically, but part of what we've realized is that what your money does while you're sleeping in your bank accounts, in your investments, often actually has a larger negative environmental impact than everything that you do with your money while you're awake, whether that's philanthropic giving or whether it's spending money to install solar panels on your roof or buy organic produce or whatever it might be from a climate consumer standpoint. And so, I mean, I sort of tell this it's like my little apocryphal story that's true, which I don't really know what the term for that would be because it's not apocryphal. But, when I moved to Seattle, and now I'm now telling two stories to this group about when I moved to Seattle, but, I tried to do everything right. I got an apartment that was in a LEED certified building that was close to transit, so I didn't have to drive so much, and it was highly walkable. I bought, I was starting over, so I bought, all used furniture. I bought organic sheets. I did all of these things. I bought my 7th generation soaps and everything that I could do to try to sort of live as sustainably as possible. And then I walked down the street and I opened up a Chase bank account because I just needed a new bank. And it didn't even occur to me to apply an environmental lens to that. But what our research at Topo shows that of all the things that I did, by far and away, the most impactful thing that I did was that I opened that bank account. Fortunately, it wasn't that impactful because I was largely poor when I didn't do that. I didn't have very much money. And so the impact was muted. But essentially, the power of that is that when you deposit money into a bank, no matter if it's a big multinational bank like Chase or a small regional bank or local bank, the money doesn't just sit in that account accruing interest. That bank takes that money and they lend it out across the economy. And what they lend it to makes a huge difference in terms of the environmental profile and the environmental impact of that. And so for the biggest banks in the world, your Chases, Bank of America collectively, they are investing between 20 to 30% of all of that of your money is being lent to the world's most carbon intensive sectors. And the emissions that stem from that are enormous. And so our organization, Topo Finance, which is really focused on understanding the role that banking and investing plays driving climate change, but also building solutions around that. In 2021, we just started asking the question, like if Bill McKibben, who's been a huge champion for our work since then, but if he's telling me, Paul, that like where I bank matters with my thousands of dollars, what does that mean for companies like Microsoft and Google who have billions of dollars? And what it led us down the path of doing was being able to actually develop a novel methodology and data for being able to calculate the emissions that stem from banking and investing and then attribute it back to the end user. And so our work, which is largely focused on companies, found that for companies like Google and Microsoft, their banking and investing actually generates more emissions than everything they do as a company combined. all their upstream emissions, all their downstream emissions, scope 1, 2, 3 combined. And when we took that research, then we started applying it back to the individual level, we found that something relatively similar exists. And that the difference between having $1 in an amalgamated bank account, which is a great community bank, or not really a community bank, but smaller regional bank, and having $1 in a Chase bank account, the emissions profile can vary by about 95%. That's because when Chase takes your money, they're going to be lending a lot of it to fossil fuels. And when Amalgamated does, they're lending it to small businesses and solar companies and all of those types of things. And so it's a pretty fascinating paradigm, because we've spent so much of our lives as environmental consumers trying to think through, and this is, no matter if they're big companies, the companies that we've talked to, they were shocked when we brought this research to them, and they had no idea. And even companies like Apple, that at the time had $190 billion in cash and over 130 sustainability employees, none of them had been looking at their banking and investing as a climate power. And the same applies for many individuals as well. And so what we have essentially found is that our banking and investing is this huge climate superpower that we've frankly been sleeping on, because we never realize that what our money is doing while we're sleeping is actually oftentimes having more of a negative impact than all of the things that we can be doing actively. It's a really profound realization that I think is changing the way that many companies, organizations, institutions, universities, and individuals are thinking about their banking and investing. And a lot of the work that we do is around building the tools and strategies to help both those big companies, but also everyday individuals align their banking and investing with their climate values. So I will drop a few of those resources into the chat here, but really appreciate the opportunity to come. The idea that Earth gives and the role that money plays and all of that, really excited to sort of tie together both the philanthropic side of that with also our everyday financial management side of that as well. And so appreciate you all being here, and excited to continue the conversation. In the meantime, I'm going to hand it over to Eliza to take it from here.
Thanks so much, Paul, for your important work. And thank you so much, Rhonda, for your incredible leadership with the Earth Gives program and for your gracious introduction. I would just make one micro correction, which is I am a co-founder of Climate Changemakers. I use that title very proudly, right next to executive director, in lieu of founder, because it really was a team, and all of this work really does require a team. And it was a team that brought together and breathed life into Climate Changemakers. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you and grateful for the opportunity, and looking forward to sharing more about our work at Climate Changemakers and answering kind of that question for folks, like, how can I really make an outsized difference? We heard from Paul some of the ways we can make an outsized difference with our money, and I agree wholeheartedly. I love the amalgamated shout out, Climate Changemakers, banks with amalgamated. Also a big fan of Atmos Financial. We were one of the early nonprofits partnering with Atmos. And so I'm going to launch into a presentation, and I look forward to fielding questions afterwards. So here we go. So as Rhonda mentioned, Climate Changemakers is an impact-driven climate advocacy program. We are advancing policy and really cultivating climate leadership and leaders through meaningful and sustained civic engagement. Political advocacy is that bridge from individual action, what can I do, to systems level impact. So the reality is that a lot of Americans, and in fact, according to the Yale Program on Climate Change Communications, 28% of us would probably or definitely take political action on climate. 2% are doing so. So that's the challenge. The opportunity, of course, is that we know that advocacy works. Climate advocacy works. activating and empowering constituent advocates does actually move the needle in elections and on policy. So the opportunity is to move beyond petitions and frankly, beyond voting. And instead of petitions, engage in meaningful volunteerism, meaningful civic engagement based on best practices in advocacy, because believe it or not, best practices are well established. And of course, flex our muscles and use that superpower that is voting, but also do more than vote. So what does it look like to engage beyond voting in elections? And we'll talk about that. So at Climate Changemakers, our solution to this challenge, this engagement gap, is that we host an ecosystem for civic engagement. Here's the formula. If you take ready and willing advocates and you support them with community and you equip them with resources, they get results. We collectively get results. And when people get results, they become leaders. They recognize their agency and are motivated to do more and grow into their own leadership. And the reality is that each one of us has the power to influence policy at every level of government and multiply our impact. And I'll talk about some of the ways we equip folks to do just that. So here's the theory of change in the form of a flywheel, right? So we support our nationwide network of climate advocates with step-by-step resources for personalized outreach. And that's, back to this notion of what are best practices. If you want to influence someone to do something, whether they are a lawmaker or your kid, you need to reach out personally. You need to reach out authentically. No one's going to be as moved by a form letter as they are by your own personal voice and outreach. Again, when you reach out using personalized language, you make an impact. One thing to note, when we reach out to our lawmakers, and I don't know the last time you called Congress or wrote out a message to your member of Congress. I hope we're all doing that. It's something that we really should be making a habit of. By and large, if we're signing our name onto a form letter, those messages get batched and processed kind of accordingly, like 8,000 messages. 8,000 of this message came through. Whereas if you write a personalized message, it can't get batched. It actually gets read by a human. So that's really something important to think about when you see that opportunity to click here to take the time to personalize, do that. 100% of our outreach at Climate Changemakers is personalized. This year, and this past year, 15% of our volunteers' personalized emails received actual direct personal responses. So they know that not only is their outreach landing, it's actually being acted upon. We did a campaign on solar for all, equipping changemakers across the country to let their city and state regulatory bodies and leaders know about the solar for all opportunity and how to apply. We had one volunteer who reached out to the Missouri Department of Natural Resources and heard back. We inquired and they're checking into it and may apply for the grant. So that changemaker then realized that they might have made the difference between the Missouri Department of Natural Resources applying for a Solar for All grant. These are some examples of the evidence of impact. And again, when you get a response, you're fired up. We were just talking about Seattle. I have a connection over here with Paul, and I'm a big lover of Seattle, went to graduate school there and lived for 10 years there. Here, Eli was happy to get a response this morning on Solar for All from the Seattle City Council, and then just kind of spells it out right there. It was a nice reminder that folks are reading my emails and has me psyched to craft and send out more. And so we have a phenomenal re-engagement rate, nearly 40% volunteer return rate, because again, people are seeing the results. Climate Changemakers provides a place for busy and productive people. We are obsessed with productive action and making a good use of our time. 60% of folks who join our community are brand new to political action, which is exciting. And strangely, that statistic has remained almost exactly steady for 4 years. But of course, that means that 40% are not new to political action. And we have folks in our community who even are professional environmental advocates. We are proud that the majority of folks taking action with us are kind of in this early to mid-career demographic that has been historically quite challenging to engage, kind of this missing middle. And we have fabulous coverage nationwide, and we have changemakers in 50 states, and DC, I think it's 95% of congressional districts. So really striving to be inclusive and nationwide, and roll out the welcome mat to people who want to make a difference. So here's the invitation. It's really simple. Show up and we'll do something productive together. I'm going to say it again. Show up and we'll do something productive together. That's it. And that's what this looks like. We call them hours of action, and they happen all week long on Zoom and in cafes and breweries and living rooms nationwide. Here's some more hour of action vibes. We are very, very proud of our, I mentioned our retention rate. We're really proud of our referral rate. 33.7% of folks hear about us through word of mouth. So not only are people taking action with us and coming back, in fact, of the folks who attend multiple hours of action, 30% attend 4 or more, right? It's really making a habit of civic engagement on climate, but they're also telling their friends. And we have just been growing organically since day one. No marketing, no, really kind of heavy-handed efforts to grow our list. Just this invitation, show up, we'll do something productive together. How'd that go? Cool, see you next time. And together we are influencing policy progress nationwide at different levels of government. So we focus on policies that maximize decarbonization potential, deliver equitable benefits, and are timely and politically feasible. We call it the no-brainer stuff, or kind of the low-hanging fruit. We're not trying to be controversial. We're really just trying to put people in touch with the productive work. So you can see some of our results, over 2,600 emails, calls, and meetings with policymakers, policy influenced across 49 states, this phenomenal 15% response rate, 31 published opinion pieces, and 19 policy milestones. And these policy milestones mark clear progress towards a policy goal. And of course, we're very proud that this number is growing year over year. Here's an example of some of the campaigns that we've taken on. Our Slack community is kind of an important part of our ecosystem. It's a great place for folks to, share feedback, share ideas, share wins, share support, and really inspire and motivate each other. Just wanted to highlight this response from Adam in St. Louis, Missouri, who got a response from his councilwoman who wanted to sit down and make a plan for how to disseminate information to her constituents. This was about heat pump rebates. So really exciting. So this election, Climate Changemakers is powering the Climate Vote, which is a hub for climate organizers and volunteers. And I'm really thrilled to convey our ethos of radical collaboration. We have partnered with organizations across the movement on advocacy, funding, and events, and in fact truly host an aggregated calendar of climate-flavored events across the movement. Of course, we all wonder, I'm one person. Can I really make a difference? I can vote, but can I really make a difference? And so I just wanted to share with you an anecdote from one corner of the country where the race margins can be as narrow as, really hundreds of votes. So there's a district in California that went by 333 votes, We really have very, very slim race margins in a lot of districts and a lot of states across our country. It is the reality. And it's kind of a bummer, but it's also a huge opportunity. You look at this number, 333, really can stick with you. And I feel like it represents, an opportunity to really make a difference. So what does it look like to, first of all, I hope everyone's going to vote, and we'll make sure everyone's registered in a moment. But what does it look like to do more than vote, and to do that in a nonpartisan way? There's a lot of opportunity. So Climate Changemakers, we are all about very little talk and a lot of action. And I am going to take a moment to take an action break right here in the middle of my talk. And I want to share with you some opportunities for nonpartisan get out the vote action. So I invite you to meet me here, which is at climatechangemakers.org/social-GOTV-2024. You can also just use this handy QR code, and I'm going to do it now. And I'm going to flip out of here, actually, and screen share a new window with you all. This is where that QR code will take you. So this is our hub of a nonpartisan social get out the vote opportunities. First, an invitation to join our Slack, and then starting at the top, register to vote. So this is key, absolutely key. Register to vote. So if you click here, you will see our playbook, and we have an action playbook, and you can ensure that you're registered to vote. These are vote.org tools. You can request a mail or absentee ballot. Encourage you to do so, and find your polling location. And then here's where we punch really above our weight. We reach out to our friends with a simple message. Are you sure you're registered to vote at your current address? Maybe they just moved. If not, can you check and register today? Here's why it's important to vote. And we kind of guide you through this kind of relational organizing aspect of practically all of our actions. So this is reminding our friends to register and vote, and of course, even consider hosting a ballot party. So this is an example of one of our action playbooks. And here's another, call voters. This link takes you through 2 hours of action where we are doing nonpartisan phone banking to climate voters in partnership with our great friends at the Environmental Voter Project. That's a weekly event, and we would love to have more folks join us. Finally, I wanted to highlight this opportunity to write letters to voters through our great partner, Vote Forward. So if you click here, you will see a list of their social, which is synonymous with nonpartisan campaigns. I know, Rhonda, you're sitting there in Arizona. And so here's an opportunity to adopt voters for this nonpartisan campaign. They make it really easy, and it is really compelling to write a handwritten message to voters and simply remind them of the superpower that is voting, not mentioning candidates or anything, just reminding them to go vote. And these letters include really important and actionable information about how they get more information about their polling place and that kind of thing. And finally, again, we always have this extra invitation to punch above your weight by sharing this opportunity with a friend, whether it's bringing them to an hour of action, making sure they're registered to vote, or sharing resources. We also have more action options. Polling places need volunteers. Another nonpartisan and incredibly important opportunity is to sign up to be a poll worker. And I share another resource here. We have a fantastic How to Have an Effective Climate Conversation resource. So with that, I'm going to flip back to my deck and wrap things up and look forward to taking questions. That wraps up our action break. And I just so grateful for the work of Earth Gives, and wanted to give you a sense of when you support our organization Through Earth Gives, where the funding goes. Funding at Climate Changemakers helps power our civic action programs. So we provide a place to plug in, again, reaching and inviting the ready and willing to take action on climate. We provide this opportunity to get up to speed, educating and cultivating effective climate advocates. And then here's the pedal to the metal. We're activating our network to engage and re-engage habitually with productive action. And of course, we're always looking for scale. So catalyzing growth and supporting leadership development. And then here's just a sampling of some of our strategic climate action campaigns, whether we're focused on reducing climate pollution from food waste in agriculture or focused on electrifying transportation and buildings. Again, we're honing in on the no-brainer opportunities to connect the ready and willing with the chance to make a difference and become a climate change maker, or realize their own power to be a climate change maker. And I will end there. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic. And if you saw me looking down, I was taking action. So
Love it.
I was following your prompt, Eliza.
Love it.
So since we're such a small group, we're just going to stay here and talk about a couple things, but let's open it up for questions first. Elaine.
I know that you're a nonpartisan group, and I appreciate that because I wish more people in this country would consider climate when they vote. But I'm very curious to know, have you had success with advocacy reaching out to Republican lawmakers?
Yes, we don't necessarily, well, we do track, I guess, to an extent, who our folks are reaching out to. And certainly a lot of people are reaching out to Republican lawmakers. We don't track their responses by partisan identity. Really just trying to encourage change makers to reach out only to the people who represent them, of course. So where they're represented by a Republican. I would say some of the key things that we do at Climate Changemakers are to just skip partisan rhetoric altogether. We don't talk in terms of party identity very much. In fact, at every opportunity, we don't. I would also say that when you're talking about federal advocacy, it's going to be pretty different from advocacy at the state and local level. We have, of course, a much stronger response rate from policymakers and their staff at the state and local level, and there is a lot more willingness across party lines to engage with climate advocates. I'll also say that, of course, you're going to tailor your language to your audience to be most effective, and our playbooks include that guidance. A lot of times when we provide templates for outreach, we provide multiple templates depending on who represents you. So we're sensitive to those distinctions. The pace of legislation at the federal level, the Inflation Reduction Act was clearly transformative, and bipartisan infrastructure, CHIPS. There's been a lot of progress recently, but writ large, it's been a maddening pace, and just the extent to which it is a politicized issue at the federal level. But there are a lot of people who care about clean air, and there are a lot of people who care about clean water, and there are a lot of people who care about jobs in their community. So if we're cautious and thoughtful about how we talk about these issues, and oftentimes just skip the word climate altogether.
Yeah.
In particular with voter outreach, there's just really, I think the name of the game is getting people to the polls. We can be quite effective. Of course, there are a lot of red states that have seen really successful and high levels of investment as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, et cetera. So
one more fast question and I'll shut up. In dealing at the federal level, I'm just wondering, And also when you're calling and doing outreach to voters and whatnot. Okay, forget it. Senior moment, lost my train of thought waiting. Never mind. I'll come back to it. Never mind.
That's totally fine. Eliza, do you see an uptick more during political years? That are highly sort of publicized or otherwise? And then also, do you find that that the opportunity for people to engage empowers them in other ways as well?
Both, all of it. Yes, absolutely. Elections are an activation moment. It's just an opportunity. People are just looking left, right, and center. How do I get involved? So it's an opportunity, and I think a really important opportunity to convey the value of taking action, whether or not it is explicitly climate related, or maybe it's really just this nonpartisan get out the vote action, but taking that action with a climate organization. There's a lot of really important organizations doing get out the vote work that have kind of no climate flavor, and they're doing really important work. At the same time, if you're a climate activist, or if you're a want-to-be climate activist, or if climate is just something that concerns you somewhere on your short list, there's a lot of value in taking action with a climate organization, and that is to help build the political power of the climate movement. It's critically important. It's a really huge opportunity. So yeah, that's why I really encourage people to attend kind of climate flavored action events, and to bring their friend who may or may not identify as a climate person. Maybe you're their climate friend. They may or may not identify as an environmentalist, but maybe the wildfires really, freaked them out last year, or this, that, or the other. So really trying to broaden the universe of people who are taking action with climate organizations to help us build that political power that we so need, because truly the greatest obstacle to making progress on climate policy at all levels of government at the speed and scale that's required is a lack of political will to get it done. I mean, that's the biggest obstacle. So that's why advocacy is so critically important, and broadening the universe of folks who are participating in that advocacy is so critically important, particularly because there's all these people who would do it but aren't doing it. So really rolling out this invitation is very, very important.
And I think to the point that Paul made earlier, it's like what we don't know, we don't know. And so if we're not calling our representatives to say this matters to me, then they don't think that climate is high on people's lists. And that's the key piece to it. I'm going to put Vernon on the spot with Eliza, and then I've got some questions for Paul, but I want to, Lewis, it looks like you've got a question.
I've got a question / comment for each of the speakers, and I'm going to start with Eliza. And being Latino, I want to kind of emphasize some of the concerns that I see and some of the needs in the Hispanic community. And this is just, I guess I'm a little bit more in tune to this because and these are a couple of organizations, Eliza, that if you're not linked up to, you might want to consider. One is Hispanic Access Foundation, and the other one is Green Latinos. Green Latinos, I have done advocacy with a lot more. And very soon they're going to have a document coming out called the Latino Climate Justice Framework, which is kind of like a roadmap for how to help Latinos who are, a very vulnerable community because they work outside, a lot of them, in farm work and construction, whatever, how to navigate the climate crisis through advocacy. Well, this year they had their annual summit in May in Puerto Rico. And that was very eye-opening for me. And I noticed that, you have a presence in a lot of states and the District of Columbia, but everybody always forgets Puerto Rico. And there's 3.25 million people there. who are, a lot of them are English, Spanish bilinguals. They're US citizens, all of them. So they have voting power, and they are affected by climate change in a big way because they're in the Atlantic where all the hurricanes, form. And so you have a captive audience of this population there, who are, I think, would be ready to receive the message of climate change through advocacy. So I just wanted to suggest that to you. I would really encourage you to contact Green Latinos and see how you can partner with them on some of this effort to get more Puerto Ricans involved in the work that you're doing, because I think it's really important and I think it would really resonate with them. The other thing about working with Puerto Rico is that because you wouldn't, language wouldn't be an issue. Like, most of the people there are bilingual anyway. You could get the resources to get stuff translated and into Spanish, and you could go ahead and push that out all over the country to other communities that have large Spanish-speaking populations. So I just wanted to put that out there as a suggestion / question for you.
I really appreciate that. I don't forget about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is very much on my radar. And we are really interested in collaborating with everyone and anyone. I would love to reach out to them and be helpful. I mean, we can do collaborative hours of action. We do that a lot. And it's just a bandwidth issue where, but yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, the entire point is that we want to put these tools. I mean, there's something very modular about climate change makers, right?
Mhm.
It's like we have hours of action, we have resources, we have some very basic principles, and putting that in people's hands is what we're all about. And we can set folks up to kind of take the pieces and run with it, or do the work collaboratively. And so it's an open invitation to partners across the movement. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, and I also think, just before I forget, that on the mainland, you have some really big, like big community movers and shakers who have a lot of money. I'm just thinking J-Lo and Lin-Manuel Miranda and, Mark Anthony, people like that, who after Hurricane Maria happened, they went and they recorded that song Maria or whatever and raised like millions and millions of dollars. So they would be very sensitive for anything related to advocacy in Puerto Rico. So, but I'm going to switch now to what I wanted to bring up with Paul. So, like here, I am based in Bishop, California, a very small town in the eastern Sierra Nevada. It's like the most rural part of California, but we do have a sizable Latino community here. It's about 25% if you put Inyo and Mono counties together. But you don't see them out recreating in nature for a number of reasons. It's very expensive to recreate in nature, anything from backpacking to skiing to whatever, right? There's also not the father to son, mother to daughter tradition of anyone teaching you how to recreate outdoors. A lot of people who are here, especially members of the immigrant community, they came from large cities in their own countries, and so they don't have that advantage. Many of them are working more than one job because it's expensive to live here. And so there's a time factor. And something that a lot of people forget is they probably have families back home that they're sending remittances to. So their disposable income is much more limited. So for a whole number of reasons, they can't recreate out in nature. Anyway, why am I bringing this up? Because this coming Saturday is Latino Conservation Week, which is something that the Hispanic Access Foundation, started about 11 years ago. The way it works is each community creates its own Latino Conservation Week event. It could be anything from a hike to a camp out to a documentary film on the environment, climate change, whatever. We're doing a resource fair in downtown Bishop, and we're combining it with live music and food, things that like Latinos come out for, right? But taking it back to like banking, Okay, people like this who are like really low income, living paycheck to paycheck, maybe have more than one job, don't even have the luxury of like recreating out in nature. Why should they care about the message that you are wanting to bring through Topo Finance, which, by the way, I think is a brilliant, and I want to look up more about what you're doing to see and go into the calculator for myself, right? But people who maybe are, a lot of them are unbanked to begin with, who are, the financial institutions that they're using are maybe just to send money, like, Western Union or whatever, or like any one of these private companies that do, envíos of money to Mexico, to Venezuela, or whatever. How can you get their attention, or does their economic power really, is it not sizable enough for what you're trying to do? I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I really appreciate the context. And as somebody with the privilege that's been able to get outside and spend a lot of time out in the mountains around Bishop, I'm just a big fan of where you live, and it's a really special corner of the world. So, I mean, I guess, so there's kind of two answers to this, which is, one, I mean, part of the reason that we work as an organization with the largest companies in the world is just they have the most money, right? I mean, companies with tens of billions of dollars are going to be able to move their banks more effectively. They can access the conversations. They can do all of that in ways that individuals who are unbanked or have, like me, $10,000 in their bank account. Like, I don't have as much power as Microsoft does, which is why we're really focused on the corporate side. So in terms of like actual power to move the banks in the right direction to align with global climate goals, underbanked or unbanked individuals simply just like, it's an unfortunate reality of the world that we live in, just like don't have that same power. That said, there's one of the things that we're really focused on is, and a lot of the work that we do, I mean, because of the data that we have is so climate focused that we tend to sort of lead with that, but there's a huge equity component of all the work that we do on the banking side. And one of the most important things to be thinking about is, what are banks doing as far as financial literacy, financial education, increasing access to the unbanked, and also what are they doing to service historically marginalized communities, underbanked communities. And so, not knowing the landscape in Bishop well from a banking standpoint, but just taking an educated guess, is that I imagine that there are some regional banks, local banks in the area that rather than taking the money, so you take the money, and if you're low income individual who maybe only has $2,000 in your bank account. Well, if you take that money and you put it in a Chase bank account, that money's being lent out all around the world in ways that probably don't align with your values and perspectives. If you go and you put it in a local bank, that money is going to stay in your local community. It's going to be lent to small businesses in your community that are Latino or run by people of color, that's going to be lent to mortgages for people who are maybe first-time homebuyers. And there's going to be a lot more connectivity to sort of how, frankly, banking used to be, which was highly localized in ways which banks were really trying to support and uplift your community, rather than it being, frankly, a vehicle for moving money around the world to maximize profit. And so not knowing your community, the bank, I mean, there's over 4,000 banks in this country. So I'm my access to knowledge around the local regional banks, I can do some research, is small, but I would imagine that there's probably some banks in your area that, that would be beneficial for people to bank with, just because it will then, the money that you put in the bank will go back to reinvesting in the local community, rather than going to invest in tar sands in Canada and offshore drilling in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, so one of the partners that we have here actually is a credit union called Alta One Federal Credit Union. They're based in Ridgecrest in Kern County, but they also serve the Eastern Sierra. And I think a couple of years ago, they got their CDFI status, which is really great, and they are one of the partners of this event that we're putting on. And so they kind of make it easy for people to get even like little loans for when they're trying to file their immigration paperwork, which can cost several $100s. And so they're providing some of those services. So I guess, what we can do is try to work with small lending institutions like, Alta One, to just keep our dollars here, right? To benefit our community here.
Yeah, and that's wonderful to hear. And yeah, I mean, and part of it would be, perhaps some of the other businesses, organizations in your community, could they move some of their business or all of their business to the same credit union? So then that credit union the CDFI has more capital, is doing better, has more resources to lend out, right? And so a lot of the work that we do, and even big companies like Netflix have committed, in the wake of George Floyd, they committed to moving 2% of their money to Black-owned banks. And so part of the work that we do is to try to push large companies to even move a percentage of their money to CDFIs. And there's a few instruments that you can do that with. But increasing their assets under management are going to benefit the community at large, because it means that they're going to have more money to lend out to those types of individuals and businesses in ways that a Chase Bank may never do. And so, yeah, so I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate the context as well about what's happening on the ground there.
And
Yeah,
Lewis,
thank you.
part of the why is because if they're working in the fields, it's heating up. I mean, the impacts on, climate, heat, and all of that are huge. So, Eliza, we actually have a formerly elected individual here. Vernon Parker was the mayor of Paradise Valley, and he also served in the George H.W. Bush administration in the Department of Agriculture, working with Black and brown farmers. And I'm sure, Vernon, you can share a bit more. So knowing that you've got a formerly elected, how would, Vernon, maybe first, why don't you riff a little bit on how it would have been, how you would have best received being approached on the issues of climate, and that how you see Eliza's presentation working, knowing that you've served in a few places.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rhonda. And first of all, both presentations were phenomenal, and thank you, Rhonda, for your incredible leadership. As an assistant secretary of agriculture, I did work with a lot of underserved communities, mainly the Black farmers and brown farmers and women farmers and Latino farmers. And one of the things that we did focus on, and what got our attention, was exactly what the doctor said. If you handwrite a letter, or if you are a strong advocate, and we knew who the strong advocates were. They would show up at least once a month. They would invite us out to their organizations. And it's like the old saying goes, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. But more importantly, I think when, as far as the federal government is concerned, when you're advocating with the federal government, especially with Congress, unfortunately, a lot of members of Congress, they really do not govern by their heart. They govern by the vote. And that's why you see sometimes a lot of congressional districts, you may have a conservative there who, if it's not a really red district, you will see that they will have to play. They will have to play in the environment because that's what the constituents want. But how do you get that message over? And it is exactly what the presentation was all about. Members of Congress, and especially in the federal government, people, they act on people taking action. And I think writing letters, that's one thing, but the most important thing after you write that letter, after you get that feedback, is to follow up, because every member of Congress, they come to the state every weekend or during the breaks. And so after you've written that letter, the most demanding thing that you can do is ask for an in-person meeting with the member, and they'll do it. But yeah, I applaud everyone's incredible efforts. And the first question, I know it was about politics and about have you seen a lot of success with Republicans? I am a Republican, and probably a little different Republican today than I was, 6 or 7 years ago. But you do have a lot of Republicans out there who care about the environment. And You know, they care about the future. They care about their children. They care about their grandchildren. They can see that the climate is changing. And so I thought I was waiting, and if I'm completely candid and transparent, when the question came, I was so interested to see, because I know that where the action really occurs in Congress. But I love the steadfast approach, because that approach was exactly what we need today, is that it has to be a nonpartisan effort. If it is not a nonpartisan effort, it will fail. And so with that, you know, congratulations on 2 fantastic reports. And unfortunately, I'm in Tucson right now, and I have to go to another meeting that I pushed back, because I really wanted to support and hear what you guys had to say. And I am so proud to be a part of this organization, and so proud of the leadership that Rhonda has displayed over the years, and in particular with this incredible effort that we have right now.
Well,
I
thanks,
appreciate
Vernon.
that.
We're going to have to connect you with Paul, because Vernon does a lot in the insurance industry, and he might be able to influence some banking changes.
That's where I am right now. So I'm going to, but anyway, thank you, Rhonda, and you guys carry on. And this was fantastic. I learned so much.
Thanks so much.
Vernon.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that. We do have a lot of constituent meetings, and we encourage folks to reach out and develop relationships with folks who represent them and their staff. We always say requesting a constituent meeting is the greatest and most underutilized superpower. Anyone can do it. Nobody does it. And we support folks across the country. We have literally a playbook. We have multiple playbooks around how to schedule a constituent meeting, how to come show up equipped, whether it's Zoom or in person. And we use our Slack to help folks network. Okay, I've gotten a constituent meeting on the books with so-and-so, who else is represented by them and wants to join. And so that's another way that we organize. So thank you so much for all of that feedback, and of course, for all of your leadership.
So I wanted to kind of wrap up here, because we've taken plenty of time, and we're a small group, but I wanted to thank Paul and Eliza and all of you for joining us. So much support and so much good work. I, of course, want to encourage everyone to visit Earth Gives and invest in one or several nonprofits, because 64% of donations are made by individuals. That's why we exist, to really rally this large constituency and get them mobilized on this big issue. At Earth Gives, you're going to find a number of organizations. We've got several indigenous groups like Sovereign Energy and the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. You'll find work being done on health issues with Arizona Health Professionals for Climate Action and Defend Our Health. And we're also thinking of those at the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana, with the Hurricane Francine really bearing down on that state right now. So all of these groups make up the ecosystem of what I consider frontline workers, people closest to the issues actually affecting the change. And so we're glad that you're part of the Earth Giving community, and we thank you for your amazing impact that you're doing. And Louis, your important work at the Eastern Sierra
Interpretive Association.
Interpretive Association. I've got all these acronyms going through my head. So thank you. And we hope that you also join us for the September 16th Power Hour. It's going to be focused on water, all things water, from tide to tap, with the Food and Water Watch folks. And you can sign up at the same place where you did for this one. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Dr. Nemser and Paul. And thank you for what you're doing. And we hope we can continue to learn from you into the future.
Thanks so much. It was
Thanks
great.
so much, everyone.